I'm gonna keep running with this. So I was just making that first video to set up that in other cultures like in India, they have a word, they have vernacular nomenclature for vernacular is like I think that's like words that are specific to a region or a culture, and then nomenclature are like words that are specifically to a scope of activity. But then in a nomenclature is very important for things because a lot of like if you were to take up classes in school at a high level for a particular field, a lot of what you're learning is actually just a specific terminology and nomenclature for things that are very obvious in common sense, but having a specific word that can articulate specific things, it can help with learning and studying things because then you facilitate collaboration with other people thinking about the same thing. But then also it facilitates learning, which is also collaboration because you are vicariously means like indirectly or like almost spiritually, you are collaborating with other people who have looked into this when you study something in as far as the terms and terminology. So it's again collaborating, but it helps to understand things also with the words. But in India, they would have that word Devani for our speech as being part of there's actually like a greater form of conscious that's appreciated as feminine, that is responsible for some of our facility around language. But then also there's something called Saraswati, and I think that's like a higher grade, maybe not higher, but it's another dimension where you have the articulation, but also the wisdom and insight, and maybe the grace and empathy that allows you to both understand and enunciate and communicate very sublime things of wisdom. They have an appreciation for those two words. But then I don't know this word in India or like maybe Sanskrit, but there may be a word which would be like just the insight in itself, or like to channel insight. I don't know what the term for that would be, but you see different YouTubers and they say like I think that I got a lot of YouTubers, some of your great YouTubers, they will approach something as though they just received a download that day or even as they're creating a video, and that's actually not fancy or like I have come to appreciate some of that by becoming a YouTuber myself in the last maybe 4 or 5 months, which is that there is something of a inspiration and insight that occurs to a person maybe a few hours or hour or shortly leading up to the inspiration to make a video. But then also within a video there's insight that occurs, and it would be, I think that if we're being honest, we can appreciate that it's beyond us. And if we're successful in enunciating ourselves and uploading it to a public platform where it may be received, vetted, engaged with, there would have to be some form of grace that would allow that to happen, in some form of meaning to an audience that would allow that to happen. So from that point, it's yet beyond us. So I just want to say that that's actually not pretentious when people are talking about downloads for different stuff. So that's all I was setting up with that conversation. So I had different insights that were occurring to me today, and I'm going to try to touch on them. But some of them, they may seem loosely related as they were occurring to me. And so like a lot of people would appreciate a video having a specific title and topic, and but sometimes it's a little bit vague in how it's occurring to a person, but it can be tied together. I think if we do justice to it. So some of the thoughts I was having today was where would I so one is that I wanted to say, so I was thinking to myself, so part of there's a movie from the 1990s called Good Will Hunting, and it's a brilliant movie with Matt Damon, and he was a gifted person who's considered a savant. There's some things in culture, like going back like you go back maybe 20 years or 50 years, and some things were appreciated then as being realities, but they've been debunked to different degrees. So back then like when I was growing up in the 90s, there was an idea of people with like an eidetic or photographic memory. And one time I was in a construction program, and we were learning about each other's histories, and then we were like reporting that to the class. And I had watched the film Malcolm X a long time ago, and back then they had a man who, in that film, there's a man who ran numbers. That was like something that was more popular in times past, like in different parts of the United States, like kind of like before we had like the lottery at gas stations, there would be like people running numbers. and he would make a point not to take notes. And I actually emulated that from that film, and I made a point more so not to take notes in life. So sometimes I'll be in like a class of some kind, and I just simply don't take notes, and I take in what I'm experiencing totally without being distracted by note taking. Because I think that the moment you get distracted about anything, you can lose the scope of what someone's talking about. But I have seen people who are very effective at taking notes, and one time I've more so seen women who are outstanding with note taking, but I'm not saying men can't also be. And sometimes within women taking notes in conversations, they can read back at the end of a conversation things that I may have forgot that I said, even though I said it that quickly. Because as much as we think we're conscious, we're not entirely as conscious as we think we are, even to the very things we say and do. And that's probably by design, because we couldn't afford to be conscious of all things at all times. But what I meant to say is that I was once cited as having a photographic memory in a cohort who were impressed that I didn't take notes. But I think it might just be more of what I had practiced. But at different times they thought about things like photographic memory. But I think some that may have been debunked by now. And then also they have thought of things as being a savant, which would be like a person who is mentally gifted to an extreme degree that would confound ordinary people. I think the movie Rain Man is an example of that. With there was a famous actor. He was embroiled in controversy in his life. I can't think. Dustin Hoffman. No, I'm sorry. I don't mean to say that wrong. There was a famous actor in the movie Rain Man, and he portrayed a person who was so gifted intellectually that he could give people at casinos a hard time by like counting cards and stuff like that. Whether something is skill or an actual organic gift, that might be arbitrary, but yet we're punished for a lot of our gifts. I was talking to a man today who said that he was I could just tell how kind and peaceful he was meeting him, and he told me in a short amount of time that he had been labeled with something in life, and he had to overcome that. But I just meant to say that I told him that I watched a video that in other countries, other cultures, they have recognized certain things that we're punished for in Western society as being actual gifts, the confirmation of the onset and the appearance of a gifted person in a community, such as some people who are considered written off, meant for being mentally affected in the United States, or in the Western society. Those would be the very people who would be recruited and maybe trained and blessed and recognized as having propensities, no kidding, spiritual gifts. In other cultures that would be appreciated, yet we pay for that in the West. In the West, if a person has a gift that makes them stand out, they may yet be punished for their gift, and then they have to pay for their own punishment. So they're being solicited and maybe intimidated and disrespected by people calling themselves professionals, yet they have to pay for those very people who are calling themselves professionals and subsidize their affluent lifestyles. And then they also have to pay for the stigma, the deprivation of living with that label. That's yet the author, Dr. Umar Johnson has said that a lot of your mental conditions are more so professional opinions, and you can't scientifically prove them, according to Dr. Umar Johnson. And yet people who are given these stigmatizing labels, they subsidize the lifestyles of the so-called professionals. They take the backlash. They have their own self-esteem and self-concept limited, which yet limits their confidence and therefore their abilities. Then they're socially, professionally marginalized for that. They deal with the stigma of that. Then if they overcome that and learn lessons for that, the stigmatization is yet redoubled, and they're dismissed and marginalized yet again with whatever insight or abilities they've attained through coming through that burden and that challenge, to be written off again. So it's very mean-spirited. But that actually might have been their gift, and that's just how backwards of a place we live in. But that wasn't my. What I meant to say, things have been debunked, positive things, photographic memory, savant, but maybe some things like this mental health stigma will be debunked in the future, and that would be a blessing. I think that the appearance of 1099 work, that's the ability to do independent work, independent contractor work, is an actual blessing from on high and something that was long overdue. Progress is slow, but progress is steady. So that would be one progress. And then if we can get past dismissing human beings as being less than human for being different, that would be another step. And so those are some of the things that were occurring to me today.